In 2019, deep in meditation, I started to have a series of visions. I saw a giant multiversal Buddha, like a Buddha that represented the entire multiverse. And I can tell it was a Buddha. And I was like, okay, this is funny. What an imagination I have. That's what I thought, right? Because I've never heard of a multiversal Buddha. So I was like, okay, great. Just like witnessing this thing happening. And then it told me there is in fact an infinite multiverse. And every time you almost died, you did die on another Earth. Every time you almost lost everything you did on another Earth, there are versions of you doing better than you, versions of you doing worse than you on other Earths. And then there are countless worlds where you do not exist. Because what everyone is taking for granted is that this is your Earth. It's for you. And then it presented to me all the times that I almost died in the past. And how I did barely survive. And a lot of times it was sort of miraculous that I survived. And it was telling me like, you think your survival, countless times where you should have died, was an accident. And I was kind of like, come on, give me a break. I mean, why? Why would this be happening? And it told me the reason I'm outliving all these other versions of me is because I'm to be its prophet. And I was sort of like, okay, that's pretty wild. And then it asked me if I was ready to be its prophet, and I was going to be given a ton of energy and wisdom and stuff. And I was like, no, I don't want it. I actually told this being, like, give it to someone else. Like, other people can use this. I'm good. I don't need this, right? And then it said, well, that's why it's you, of course. I was like, oh my God. And then I said, hey, look, I'm agnostic. I don't even believe in this stuff. Why would you pick me? And then it started making fun of me about my practice of radical non-transactionalism, of how I've helped hundreds of people for free in the city and stuff. And so, yeah, that's what atheists do, right? They help hundreds of people for nothing, just to create kindness in the world. I'm like, yeah, the atheists can do that, It was just making fun of me a lot. And it kind of was telling me to surrender and accept that I might be this being. And it presented me a previous death I had as this sage Wonhyo. And death was brutal. It was really painful. Then it told me that spirituality sort of failed. Religion is failing, and it's not really teaching the unity as well as it used to. And how will I commit to spreading the Dharma better, And I was like, oh, I'll use fiction. I'll use fiction and tell stories of different types of people so that people understand each other a lot deeper. And fiction will be a vehicle, a lie that people believe in on purpose, and you don't have to fool anyone. And that way I can present something that's totally fake to an atheist, and they'll take it in fully knowing that it's fake. I'm not forcing anyone to believe in anything. And that's how you spread the Dharma beyond religion. And then this being was like, correct answer, It presented me with a bunch of former sages and teachers and how they failed and how they were corrupted, and asked me how I would, deal with that. I was in this like love-filled realm of total embodied bliss and stuff. And it asked me like, all right, you ready to go back? And I was like, yeah, kinda. And then this being was like, well, you don't want to stay? I was like, I do, but if I left, my spouse would be alone, and they suffered so much, and that'd be so cruel if I just disappeared like that. I mean, even though this feels great, I think that's just too cruel. And then the being was like, correct answer, and just flooded me with a lot of power, energy, and wisdom. And for a while afterwards, I was in this really intense, like, positivity state, shifting reality everywhere, and everything was synchronizing in a super alchemical way. It was kind of mind-blowing, and I became like more psychic than ever. And that's nothing I have ever wanted, because I embrace chaos. I don't need to know, 6 months later, I went to Korea for the second time in my life ever. And I was acting like Mary Poppins all over Korea, just showing people ways to look at the world differently. Conservatives, making them see different things. Eventually I went to sleep, and I was driven to a temple while I was sleeping. And I woke up and I was like, what is this? Because I could feel this intense energy. Like, oh, this is a famous temple. I was like, okay, cool. I'm walking around and I see this one Buddha. I'm like, okay, cool. Then I see this other statue of Buddha holding their finger like this. And I instantly know this was the multiversal Buddha in my vision. I was like, what the hell is going on? And I read its name. It said Vairocana, Buddha of infinite wisdom, and stuff like that. I was like, what? And I look up this Buddha. The first sutra that mentions this Buddha said, I sit upon a throne, upon a lotus flower with 1,000 petals, and each petal has 100 million worlds on it. And each of these worlds has its own Sakyamuni Buddha. And this is clearly a reference to a multiverse. I even asked ChatGPT, like, hey, what do you think of this? And it told me that currently in Buddhist scholarship, the Vairocana Buddha is not seen as a multiversal Buddha. But that conclusion makes a lot of sense. I've spoken to several monks of different sects about these visions and this being and what it's told me, and they believe that there might be some veracity to these visions, and that I might actually be some sort of avatar prophet being so far, right? Because I have nothing to gain from it. I have no agenda. I didn't want this. That's another thing. A lot of times the true prophets, they didn't want it necessarily. And that's sort of why I was chosen. And in a lot of ways, the best leaders were like that. They're the ones that didn't want to do it, but they sort of needed to. They were the one. It's a very strange thing when you always like wait for the one, and then you look in the mirror, you're like, wait, is it me? Jeez. That's sort of a mission I have, for no other reason than that it's fun and it's wild and crazy and makes life more magical. So there's really all there is to it. So follow me on this journey as I teach as much as I can and spread whatever Dharma lessons I'm learning in a way that's more accessible, relatable, and actionable than others. Take care, y'all.